I remember one Christmas Eve, like this is how ridiculous things get, that rather than being with my husband and my not even 2-year-old son, I was trying to finish off work on Christmas Eve, because that to me felt so important that I got this particular project sort of wrapped up before Christmas. That at that time, that felt completely normal. Like that wasn't, I can't say that my boss was necessarily standing over me and telling me to do that, but there was me, I was also doing that. I was there thinking, honestly, at some level, thinking that the more important thing in my life was to finish that project than it was to spend time with my family.
If your career looks great on paper but feels wrong in your bones, you're not alone. Welcome to From Corporate to Calling, your lifeline into meaningful work. I'm Alyssa Murphy, a regenerative business mentor and former startup CEO who walked away from corporate systems to create work that brings life. Each week, I share stories, reflections, and provocations to help you recognize the signs of burnout and make a career change with purpose. If work looks good but feels wrong, this is your invitation to get out of corporate and into your calling. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Murphy, and this is From Corporate into Calling. This week, I'm excited to share with you the first in my Finding Purpose series. This is going to be a series of conversations where I'm speaking to clients and other amazing people who have taken that leap out of the corporate world of work, done the inner work, done the outer work, and created their own meaningful careers and businesses. Today you're going to be hearing from my client Clare, who worked with me inside of the Meaningful Business Incubator. Clare is going to tell you her story right back from the days when she worked in creative agencies in London, working incredibly long hours, really all-consuming commitment to her work in corporate sustainability. What finally made things click for her and made her decide to step out of that world, and how after a long pause raising her babies, she found the courage to pursue her passions and the learning that she'd done in her masters and create a really exciting and unique regenerative offering that aligned with her values and allowed her to create a work life that put family first. If Clare's journey resonates with you and you are ready to take that leap all the way out of corporate, if you are ready to reimagine your relationship with work, and if you want to build a meaningful business that brings life to you and to those around you, come and have a chat with me about the Meaningful Business Incubator. It's a 6-month intensive coaching program where we will design, test, and launch your regenerative business or offering. Just send me an email, Alyssa, A-L-I-S-A, @lifesizemedia.com, or use the link in the show notes to book a call with me, and we'll talk about what the Meaningful Business Incubator can unlock for you. Now, without further ado, it's over to Clare. Hi Clare, welcome to the podcast. It's very exciting because you are the first guest I've had on the podcast that's actually been here in the office with me. We are in the same room, we can actually touch each other. And so Clare is the only client I've ever had who is actually here in the same space as me. We live in the same town and we've had the joy of being able to do all of our coaching work together in person, often out in the wild, and we'll come on to that. But Clare has agreed to come to talk with us today, and Clare, what I would love to share with people is kind of your story in terms of how your work life has changed. So perhaps going right back to what your kind of conventional work life looked like, why you chose to step out of that, where you were when we started working together, and then we can take it up to where you are now, which, spoiler alert, involves launching a really exciting regenerative offering. So does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right, so take us right back to the beginning in terms of where you were at the sort of peak of what would be considered your successful career.
So the peak of my career, I was, well, from the age of like 24, actually even prior to that really, and until I left, I worked for creative agencies in London. So predominantly on brand strategy and corporate communications. And when I left, I was client partner, I think was the term. I was working on multiple projects. I had clients in Germany, so I was regularly flying over there, and I had young children, actually young child, sorry, and I was working very long hours. Dylan was 2, and we'd drop off at nursery. My husband would do the drop off 8 o'clock in the morning, then I would have to get to my son on the other side of London by 6. And some nights that was a challenge. The tubes weren't working or something. I remember one day ringing my husband and saying, I'm trying to get on the train and there's no tubes and I think I've been at a meeting. And he said, well, I can't get there. And I got to the nursery and Dylan was in his coat and they'd actually switched the lights off. So he had like a little coat on and they were just sat there, and it was, those kind of things are actually really difficult in the end. And I think for a long time I'd also been feeling like when I did that job in my 20s, I loved it. I worked with I had lots of autonomy. I worked with designers and strategists, and we would create our own projects ostensibly with lots of different clients. And my clients were like the who's who. We had, actually BP was one of them at one point, but we did like L'Oreal, and we'd go to Paris, and it felt like quite an exciting time. But I think there was something sort of starting to make me feel uneasy about not perhaps just the work that we were doing, which was a lot of it was around sustainability communications in one particular agency. So there was something kind of maybe starting to maybe make me question what we were doing. But more than that, I think it was the lifestyle. It was long hours. I mean, it was just long hours. Like agencies are quick. You have it in a day, and that's fun to a certain degree. But then at a certain point, the fun sort of stops. And so but I don't think I would have stopped. So though there was little bits of me that was thinking maybe this isn't quite right for me. There was a money thing as well, because I earn as much as my husband earned, so I had to keep working. But then I got pregnant with twins, and that really did change everything. And I was very sick during my pregnancy, but I didn't take a single day off work. And I kept working until I was taken to hospital, and they basically said, you have got nothing left in your body, we need to stop now, basically.
I don't think you've ever told me this, because just listeners may know, I also had twins. My twins are 2 years younger than yours, I think. And I was also really sick through my pregnancy and found it extremely physically hard. And I cannot imagine how you went to work every day, because I mean, at the time I was running a company, but I had sort of more flexibility, I suppose. But I would lie in bed until I had to like literally drag myself out for like super critical meetings and then go back. I mean, it's just, it's quite astonishing what we ask for ourselves and what work, like that kind of conventional work asks of us as well.
And I used to, this is probably graphic, but I'd get a bus down the Old Kent Road, and on the way home I knew where the bins were, because I would get off the bus to be sick, because I was sick. I think between pregnancies, just to say, they do make you more sick, and they do actually bring that with them. Yeah.
And it really strikes me, that story that you shared as well about like picking up little Dylan, him, like them sort of waiting with the lights off, that there's a real lack of kind of humanity in that model that requires long hours, sort of unwavering contribution. That for me, like part of thinking of regenerative work is like just making space for the human stuff that happens to us, that like we need to go and get our kid, or somebody gets sick, or our parents are aging, or we're growing 2 humans inside of us, like that there's just so little space in kind of conventional work for just being a human and all the things that happen to us in life.
Yeah, but also in our own heads. I think that's the other thing. Like, there was a need for me to work. I was living in London. I had to pay a mortgage to pay. I didn't really have, and that's my job. Well, that was my job, and so I sort of had to. But there is another. I think the latter job that I had, I actually had quite a relatively understanding boss. He had a family, but I think there was something within me as well that had come from that world, or within me. Who knows what happens? But I remember one Christmas Eve. Like, this is how ridiculous things get. That rather than being with my husband and my not even 2-year-old son, I was trying to finish off work on Christmas Eve, because that to me felt so important that I got this particular project sort of wrapped up before Christmas. That at that time, that felt completely normal. Like, that wasn't, I can't say that my boss was necessarily standing over me and telling me to do that. And what would I, maybe if I'd have not done it, the consequences, I don't know what would have been. But there was me, I was also doing that. I was there thinking, honestly, at some level, thinking that the more important thing in my life was to finish that project than it was to spend time with my family.
Where do you think that compulsion came from?
I mean, it's really hard to say what's the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Where does it come from? So kind of, I mean, I think you've talked about it as well, and obviously you had your own business. It's a slightly different results as well. But I worked with somebody else. I worked so hard for so many years. I literally did nothing but work. I just worked. I'd get in early in the mornings. I'd work long hours. I mean, rarely in my 20s I finished before 9. The weekends were very quite hedonistic. So it was just this constant cycle. And I remember having one job within an agency where I finished at 5, and I got to the train station at 5 o'clock one day. Or again, these things are really popping in my head because I can remember it really clearly, London Bridge, and seeing all the trains. And I thought, what am I going to do? It's 5 o'clock. What do people do with it? I had literally, I don't have hobbies. I don't have anything other. And then I always knew I wanted a family, but then I had Dylan, and then I was like, and actually I left my job and I didn't have a job, and at that point I was thinking, oh, do you want to do something different? But again, money, I felt like for whatever reason I needed to keep going. But yeah, I was went back to nursery at 10 months, and at that point I went back for 3 days, and I was like, there's no way I can do this work in 3 dads. I need to do 4 days, obviously. And then I used to work on a Sunday to catch up from the Friday that I had off.
I obviously, yeah, we have very different experiences because I was an entrepreneur, so I worked for myself, but I recognise that compulsion to work and that feeling of what will I sort of possibly do if it's not there. I remember when I got married and I was pregnant at the time, and I took 10 days off to go to New York to get married and sort of have a honeymoon at the same time. And it was the first time in, I'm trying to work out the dates now, close to 10 years that I had switched off from work, in that period of time. So I really recognise that, but I find it very interesting to think about where it comes from. And for me, my sort of working hypothesis is that it's, you say about the chicken and egg, I think it's that the system asks so much of us. So the expectation on you was that you work the long hours, that the project gets done no matter what, that you don't let something like getting pregnant or being sick or having a young child in any way get in the way of your ability to perform. And that's a real demand. And because that is asked for us, we sort of respond by almost doubling down on that, because it is unnatural to kind of make that bargain where we and to say, yes, I can give you that much. And so we kind of give it all of us, because it's the only way we can actually kind of make sense of how much is being asked of us, is that we invest our self-worth and our kind of meaning and our value into that exchange for work. And then it becomes really quite frightening to think, well, who am I outside of this?
Yeah, it does.
So take us to that point for you, because that did happen for you, where it reached the point where, like you said, the fun well, it sounded like the fun had stopped for a while, but it reached the point where you needed to change things.
Yeah, I mean, my hand was slightly forced, but I woke up one night in the middle of the night and wrote this letter, and I said that I will never work like this again to my unborn children, and then everything changed. So when the twins were like 5 months old, we left London and we moved to Widenhoe, which is where we are now, and that meant financially things changed because suddenly we weren't paying those kind of everything. It meant that I didn't have to work to pay the mortgage. That's essentially what it meant. Whereas prior to that, I had to work to pay the mortgage. Like, this meant I didn't, and also just having three young children under 3, under 2 at one point, because they were in dinner in 2 and the girls were born. So everything just switched for me. Like, it was suddenly like, but I wanted it to switch. Like, if I'd have really been invested in that job as a career, perhaps maybe I would have. And maybe I wouldn't. But either way, that everything sort of changed at that point. And for 2 years, I'd say that I was just so immersed in children that I didn't particularly have time to think. Although there was always this nagging sense, of I need to get back to work. So there was this kind of dual thing. There was a little bit in my back of my head that was going, well, this is fine for now, but obviously it's not fine forever, for multiple reasons. And then I did, when the girls were 2 or 3, I started a master's, and that coincided with lockdown. I'm trying to get all my dates mixed up, but yeah, lockdown obviously happened as well. So I did my master's in sustainability and behaviour change, which I loved, but again, I really threw myself into that too. So there was another part of me that was still really really wanting to do something. And then at that same point, a lot of people sort of saying, what are you doing? What are you trying? As if it was never perhaps enough just to be a mother. Like, that's quite a hard thing to say, but I think. And then when I finished my master's, that's when I think we kind of met. And I think I just felt very, very, very lost. I couldn't conceive of work. I knew I wanted to go back to work. I not why. I can't. Maybe the why is an interesting one, but as I knew I wanted to do that, but I couldn't conceive of work as being anything other than what it had been. So for me, work is associated with everything. Like, it was like long hours. It was my whole identity. It was just what I did, and I couldn't see how that would ever be compatible with children.
Yeah, and I remember that was a really big part of our work at the beginning. Our work together was that that kind of overshadowed everything for you, because it was like you thought of anything that you might want to try or explore or even research came with this sort of baggage of, but it's going to mean going back to that way of existing. It's going to mean sacrificing time with my family. It's going to mean really long hours, getting burnt out. And it took quite a while, didn't it, for that to kind of shift. And I think one of the really powerful things that we did at the beginning was kind of setting this vision, do you remember, of this balance that you wanted to have, like long before you knew any specifics about the kind of work that you were doing. It was these sort of foundational pieces of like, my family must be part of this, it has to be balanced. And I remember this sort of, there was like a peacefulness that you were looking for in work, which clearly we can hear from your story wasn't there for you before.
Yeah, exactly. We've got when we first did our first session together in the wild, we had this image, didn't we, that, well, I don't know whose head it came from, my head probably, but you shared the image somehow of that sort of standing by the sea with a cup of tea in a warm jumper, and that was what I wanted in my life. And how could work be part of that?
That's right. Yeah. And it's so interesting, because I think most people actually live kind of their whole professional lives thinking, what is work going to be, and then how do I fit in the life around that? Yeah. And what we did was kind of turn that around to like, I want that experience of that kind of, it's a kind of metaphor, but like being by the sea, being on the coast, being cozy, and then like let's work from there. And I think so many people miss that, even when they have had a similar experience to you of, you know, taking a big leap out of what seemed to everyone else to be a really successful career. And but the next question is always, what do I do next? What is the work that I'm going to do? And we miss that step of like, how is work going to feel like? And I think that is such an important starting point.
Yeah, it's the main work, I think. I don't know for other people, but certainly for me, it's reimagining what work can be, and then thinking that it can be something different. Because I think the image at the sea was a kind of cozy cup, and we have been talking about this, about being cozy, but what that means essentially. But I think for me, what it meant, and this came out through our coaching, was that I wanted something that was a craft and meaningful. Like I wanted something that I was doing, like it was sort of like being sort of physical, but I wanted something. I'd spent lots of my career was spent doing things that really, at the bottom, when it really came down to it, they weren't really doing anything. Sometimes it was being busy for being busy. It was like going to lots of meetings and a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of. It was just there wasn't. I worked in a creative industry, which is kind of ironic, isn't it? I say that, but I wanted something that I could build. I think that was kind of what I was searching for. Like, and I say it as a craft, and then all of my kind of imagery that kind of came about was often about people that had a craft, and it was like an artist or a carpenter or something that was like I had this real craving, but that's not where my love is either, but not where my skill set is, certainly. So I was kind of a bit like, well, so the only people that I could really see that were doing anything that kind of work that I was drawn to were people that were very much not in that corporate office environment. So that was one thing that was very clear when I looked at where those images were kind of coming from. It was always people that were quite, well, I mean, interesting solo, but that isn't necessarily what I want. But it was like people that are doing something they really believe in. Like that was quite a strong feeling. And so it was but then it was like, well, that's not the work that I know. That's the people that are artists or carpenters, or I'm trying to think of other examples, or have a farm, or run retreats, or yoga teacher. That was one that kept coming up. Was there? If a yoga teacher, not because I wanted to be a yoga teacher, but I think it was something that just wasn't from that world.
Yeah, and exactly, and allowing yourself to think. I talked about this a couple of episodes ago. Like, to start thinking of yourself as an artist, I think is a really big leap, actually, for a lot of people. But it's something I really believe in, because fundamentally, what is an artist? Someone who is creating something, and something, like you say, that they really believe in, and something that will have some kind of impact on others, that will make some kind of lasting change.
Yeah, exactly.
And how did you talk us through how those kind of threads started coming together? So once you were more connected with the feeling of how you wanted work to be, and shifting your ideas about what work meant, and from this kind of the sort of corporate experience that you'd had into this more like craftsmanship kind of thinking, how did this sort of thread start to come together into what you were going to do next?
Well, over time, and with a lot of help from you, I mean, as we both know, these threads were there, but there was a kind of a couple of breakthrough moments, weren't there? But it took time. And actually, I think in the sense, I wish that I'd listened a little bit more about having that time, because I think I wanted to get on and do stuff quite quickly, didn't I? And in the end, having a bit more time, allowing myself a bit more time just to be like in that space would have probably been quite helpful. But in terms of your question, what things that, one, I think there's a couple of really things that really stood out for me. One was I had this big thing about my age, so I was like, I'm too old to do anything. This was a big thing for me. I was like, I'm in my 40s, mid 40s, I'm past it. That was a really big thing, and you really helped with that because you made me think about other people I could look at that were doing really exciting things in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. So this was a big thing. I wanted this period of like trying to work out what this next thing was. It's been a very, very difficult thing. It's been very hard, and I've had you to help me, and I just honestly don't think I would have done, because it's just been hard. It's hard to reinvent yourself.
It is. Yeah.
It's much easier just to go back to doing what you were doing, isn't it? This is hard work.
But I think the mindset shift that you're talking about there is, and the thing of slowing down, because I think a lot of people feel like, I can't afford to slow down, or like I'm getting older and I can't, so it needs to be done now, or I've already had a career break and like I need to solve this. I think a real shift that you had was, but if I'm trying to create work that I can do into my 70s, then okay, if this takes a year, that's nothing. If this serves me for the next 30 years. Yeah, that was the shift. And we had this conversation, didn't we? And I think you've actually said it on the podcast before, but it again, things stick in my mind. We had to kind of know exactly where we were. We had a conversation, we talked about your auntie, I think, and my nan.
Your nan, and her knee or hip.
Her ankle, so I can't remember what podcast I told. I think it's in the one where I talk about age and regenerative work. But my nan had kind of like shattered her ankle in, I think even in her late 40s, and just never really sorted it out, and never took the time to get proper physio or get the surgery that she needed. And she's now in her late 80s, and it's like affected her whole life. And I often think like if she could have her time back, would she not have wanted to invest? Like, I'm sure at the time she was just busy, or it just felt like, oh, it's going to take too long, like working with a physio or whatever it might be. But I'm sure if she could have had her time back, she would have invested that time, because actually what she would be giving herself was like so much more mobility for decades to come of her life.
Yeah. So that's what the shift was. And I remember it clearly. It was a bit like, so whereas previously I've been thinking, right, I need to decide what I need to do, I need to get on and do it, because the time's running out. And then the shift came, and it was like, oh, but I want to do this for the next 20, 30 years. So now actually it's about doing something that's going to last. Change happens, things happen, maybe I won't want to. But in terms of this real, like, more intentional change of direction, you can't do that many times in your life because of the energy it takes you to change direction. And so maybe there'll be some more and more organic shifts, but I definitely thought, right, I want to now, I was like, we looked forward, didn't we, to what I would be like at say 70, and how I would look back, and what I wanted my work to be, and how, so that was a big shift. That was one of the threads that shifted. So I had that I knew I wanted to craft, and I'm talking about it in the widest sense of the word craft. I knew that I wanted something that would fit with family life. I knew I didn't have the energy to work those hours anymore. So there was these little threads that were coming through quite strongly. And then there was a fourth one, and I can't remember right now.
I'm curious, and I'm sure people will be curious, because we've talked a lot about how the mindset shift, and we haven't even got into like more of the kind of personal dimensions that you can keep for yourself, but there was a lot of inner work as well that you had to do on kind of self-confidence, self-worth, all of this kind of thing. And like anyone who's making these kind of shifts, that like all of that stuff is going to come up, and that takes time, it takes work. But I think it's also really inspiring people to hear like the practical side, because I think what you've done with what you're now putting out into the world is you've taken all the experience that you had for your corporate life. Like, it's not like that was wasted or that was thrown away. You've used that as a sort of foundation. You've used everything that you learned in your masters, that's all in there. And then you've combined that with where you are in your life now, with what you're really, really passionate about, and like you say, with like something that can be a craft for you going on. And I think like that's what so many people are longing to do. And so maybe you could just talk, why don't you tell us about what you're doing now, and maybe take it, we can see how those threads came together.
We should at some point talk about the purposeful income part, because that actually was a big thing as well. But so what I'm doing now, so I'm building a business as a story facilitator in the climate and community space. And at the core of my offer is something that I've called story labs, which are essentially like participatory workshops or experiences that bring teams or multiple teams or communities together to share stories or experiences or perspectives, and then to kind of look at what the common threads are within those stories and create collective narratives from them that can be used to shape communications or place-based initiatives or research. So essentially it's bringing, ultimately what the aim is to bring kind of slightly different voices into conversations, into stories to start shifting narratives. So that's like a bigger ambition, but there is some quite practical kind of outputs from that as well. And it's quite, in a way, it's, Story Labs, it's quite, in a sense, it's quite a simple offer, but it combines both the kind of brand communications world that I was in for so long with social sciences. So how you kind of create more inclusive spaces and elevate voices that aren't often heard. And there are some quite practical reasons for wanting to do that, in the sense that stories that tend to be shaped by people tend to then also resonate with people. So there's this kind of quite practical thing. That's my thread now.
No, that's exactly it, and it's such exciting work, and it's also interesting, like exactly that you say, like it goes back to the foundations that you had in your career, and it's like probably on paper doesn't seem like a dramatically different thing. And I think often people sort of feel like when they feel called to meaningful regenerative work that it's going to be this completely new start, that they're going to have to go and completely reskill in a different area, and there's this sort of feeling of like, I'll just be nowhere because I'm like whatever age, like I'm in my mid-40s, and then I'm starting a totally new career. And I don't think that's actually necessary for most of us, like, because I think so many people are bringing with them a wealth of experience and connections and education and all of this kind of stuff, but the real shift is like how you're expressing that, like who you're doing that work for, the way, like you say, your relationship with that work. It's a totally different thing, like you doing that kind of work for huge brands that, like, in many cases sustainability is a kind of sticking plaster or an excuse for business as usual, and doing that within like a big corporate system that then filters down to you being required to sort of give it so many hours of your life, to you doing an expression of that work that feels like a craft that allows for like genuine balance and integration with your family, and where you get to choose who you do that work for and really feel like the contribution that work can make.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I suppose it's about doing something on my own terms for things that I believe in, and using many of the tools in the sense that because I think creative communications and advertising and branding, all those things that I was kind of connected to, they've got some really there is great stuff that comes out of there. They own like a lot of my friends work in that sector still. In fact, most of my friends and I think that they have the like this sort of, I'm thinking of the word, but almost like the lion's share on creativity, some like the brightest minds in terms of creative output and the way but I just stopped believing in what it was being used for. I didn't necessarily stop believing in the tools. I've never been in performance marketing, for example, where I wasn't on that side. I was always on the side of like story and that creation bit, which I loved. I mean, I love writing. And the other thing we've always talked about is I love being with people. So I knew that I didn't want to do something that was purely online. I did know that. That was another quite big thing for me. I wanted to be with people. And so it was trying to look at those different bits, and I'd done my research in a community where I got to hear people's stories I've been working in an academic setting, again, where I got to hear people's stories and interpret those with quite a lot of rigour, like not just interpreting them in a off the hammer, but actually really been thinking, what is going on here? What is the meaning behind them? What are people saying? What's the collective story? What can we learn from this? This is really interesting because we're not hearing from the same people that we normally hear from, because that's the other thing in a brand and advertising setting. We obviously do the research, undoubtedly, but ultimately, really, everything came down to the amazing minds of strategists at the end of the day, to interpret that, and then you'd go into meetings and they'd be like, da-da, here you are, this is what you've done. And that's works, but it's not really hearing from anything new, I don't think, because it tends to be quite similar people that you're interviewing, and they tend to be quite similar people that are dissecting those interviews. And so I think there was lots of elements that fed into this particular.
Yeah. And I love what you say about, like, not necessarily, maybe falling out of love with who the work was done for and a lot of the way that it was done, but that the foundations of it, like, were still things that you wanted to hold on to, and you absolutely have in terms of where you've now taken your work. I think that's really comforting as well for people to hear that that's why I do what I do, because I think there are so many incredibly talented people who are just capable of making stuff happen, like who can do extraordinary things. And I just feel, and I think many of them feel, that they're doing it for the wrong purposes and for the wrong people, and how incredibly exciting it is to think when we can harness all of that towards building a better future for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, taking those bits and taking the good bits out. And
okay, so I have a few final questions. Let's do a quick fire round.
Yeah,
to finish up.
If I can do that.
What was the hardest moment of coaching together?
The bit before the breakthrough was the hardest, wasn't it? So I had this. It was. I think I'd got to a place and I was thinking I'm quite happy with that, and something wasn't quite right, something wasn't quite right, and then I was like, right, I'm going to go and work in a bookshop.
Yes, I remember. Yeah,
the bookshop phase.
Yeah.
In fact, I tried to get a bookshop and didn't have any availability, but it was a bit. I need to work in a bookshop.
Yeah.
This is just the only way to do this work, is to do something that literally I can just go and do and I don't think about again. I remember it, and then we had the crying on the beach day, and I was like, I just broke. I was like, I just cannot do this anymore. Like, what is wrong with my mind? And then sat on the beach and was suddenly just like, oh, okay, maybe this is what I want to do. I've just been making everything just really hard for a long, long time. So I think the hardest part was it's not linear, is it? Nothing's linear.
No.
So you kind of have these break moments when you think, but I think you always know.
Yeah.
What didn't I? Suddenly I knew, like, and again, it was wiggly. There wasn't like, and it feels so silly at the end, because at the end I'm probably quite where I was when I started. But it was, yeah.
I think it was, from my perspective, it was like the point where you were very tempted to quit on yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that, like, there's nothing wrong with working in a bookshop. I often have fantasies about how lovely it would be to work in a bookshop, but I also don't think that is your path. And I think it's very often, it's so interesting in those moments when we're kind of almost ready to walk away, is actually when we're so close. Like you say, it was right before you sort of had a breakthrough, and I remember, like, very quickly all the ideas kind of came together after that point.
Yeah.
What was your favourite part of coaching together?
Oh, what's so many favourite parts of the coaching? Well, I mean, on a personal level, we got to spend time together, and that's actually really lovely. I think that the thing, though, that I would never have got without coaching, which I couldn't have done by myself, was someone that believed in me. Like, that was like the best thing, because I suddenly had someone that didn't see me as that internal dialogue going in your head going, you'll never do this, you're too old, who do you think you are? And each week there was someone that didn't see that person. They saw someone entirely different, and there was no. I honestly don't think that I wouldn't have believed that I could do something by myself. I don't think.
Mm.
So I think that was the best bit. And some weeks you were tough though. On me, you know, it's tough love and stuff.
Alyssa, I can be quite tough. It's true. I think, but what you just said about belief, I feel like that is the most important job that I have as a coach, is that my belief in my clients and what they're going to build is like so far ahead of where they are. And then what's so gorgeous for me is the moment when it catches up. And I can distinctly remember those moments where I was like, oh, like Claire's belief has caught up with mine, and like we're both in that shared belief of this now, because it's real and it's happening, and it does take time. And I think it's something really important for anyone who might be listening, thinking about making this kind of shift. Like it does take time. And I know you were just sharing with me before we started recording, you're now in that that very early stages of launching a business. But I think it's really great to hear that I feel like you've slowed your pace down, and you're now approaching this with the mindset that you're building something to last. And I think that to me is like what successful regenerative entrepreneurship looks like.
And also, I think you talked about before, and so when you were quick fire, but I think it's really important to say about the difference between me now and the difference between when we first met and now is huge. And I'm still in the very early stages, so in some ways not like huge amounts have changed, but one thing that has changed, which is the biggest thing, is that I'm committed to something. That was the hardest thing, wasn't it? It was just getting, starting an idea, coming out of it, this one, and actually you probably need to do that because you need to find the thing that feels right. But there's such a different energy in suddenly having something to do, to actually really okay, right, this is what I'm doing, and now I need to do this, I need to do this, and it's hard. You have to get rejection. I'm not gonna suddenly be, earning 100,000 this year. It's still building up, but suddenly it feels more doable because I'm on the path. That's the huge change that's happened. Like actually having something to commit to every day.
Yeah, and actually you mentioned, so maybe this is a good place for us to think about the purposeful income path, which was interesting because I created that like sort of towards the end of us coaching together, and in some ways I sort of thought that I shared it with you before I shared it with anyone else, that I don't know, you might have been past that stage, but you found it really helpful to go through that framework.
Yeah, there was two things I think that really did help, and they were quite late in, because obviously with me we had to do a lot of the mindset work. I don't know if that's necessarily the case for everyone, but for me it was like that was a big thing. But then on like the practical fronts, mini business, that one term you said to me one day really shifted it, because I was like, okay, you can build a business within I'm not 20, so I can't do it every second of the day. I've got 3 children, so I have to do it in these hours. So it's a mini business. It's not the only thing in my life. It is one element of my life, and that really has changed things. Like I stop at 2:30 and I pick my kids up, and I don't start again until the morning. And I look forward to starting again in the morning. So I'm like, exciting! I get to start again in the morning. And the purposeful income path, because it's good to have a goal. And it's good to have it's like a little goal, isn't it? So I've got this goal that I want to earn so much money, and by end of next March to pay for us to go on holiday. So it's a really tangible goal. It's not ludicrous, and it's still relatively ambitious. And it means that I'm quite focused on story labs. So I'm not focused on whereas before I was a bit like, I would do bits of freelance work and I'd be like I'd be like, I'll do anything almost. Now I'm like, oh no, I just do this now.
Yeah, and it reinforces that commitment, which is I think the theme that has kind of been running through our whole conversation, isn't it? Like making that commitment to yourself, making your commitment to this journey to building something that's going to serve you for however long into the future, and then also committing to your idea. And I think that's where the purposeful income path can be really helpful, because it is so tempting to move to the next idea, or to be influenced by what other people have to say about your idea, or think so many people that I work with are like, well, but maybe I just need to go back and have a job, or here's a contract, maybe I should just do that contract. And like, there'll be times when that's the right choice, but I think at the heart of that, it has to be that you really are committing to this thing that you build, and you take that one step at a time. So yeah, it's really lovely to hear that was helpful to you, as well as the concept of creating a powerful mini business, which is also how I think about my business, being in a very kind of similar stage of life to you. It's totally different to when I was 25 and had a wild idea to set up a business and just gave it everything for 13 years. I'm not in that place anymore, but I think we can still create really powerful mini businesses that bring us life and bring life to all those around us. Yes. Oh, thank you, Clare. It's been such a lovely conversation. It was such a joy to work with you over those months as well, out in the woods by the beach.
I miss it now. It's funny. But it's good to. But like I said at the end, it's good to kind of take flight, and I feel ready. I felt ready at the end. It was like, yes, this is, I don't need Alyssa anymore.
Well, and that is when I know my work is done.
Yes.
Thank you. If this episode of From Corporate to Calling was helpful or inspiring, follow the show so you don't miss an episode. And if you know someone who's questioning their career, send them this podcast. Lifelines are meant to be shared. Remember, you don't have to tolerate burnout or misalignment. You can redirect your skills into meaningful work that brings back life to you and to the world around you.